All right. Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Anne Arundel County Police Accountability Board. My name is Jeanette Ortiz, and I am the chair. I would like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And before we get started and getting into the agenda, I just wanted to introduce our newest member of the board, Sharon Elliott, who is representing the city of Annapolis. I was remiss in not introducing her publicly at our August 15th meeting. So this is Sharon's second meeting with us. So welcome, Sharon. We're so excited to have you here. I don't know if you wanted to say something quickly.
I just wanted to say hi and thank you for the introduction and just express my appreciation for being able to participate in the work of the PAB and to meet all of you officially. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. And we can go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes. Folks had a chance to review those. Friendly reminder, to the public, we had the last meeting last Monday on August 15th, and we heard presentations from the Crofton Police Department and the Anne Arundel Community College Police Department. So are there any questions or comments regarding the minutes, or is there a motion to approve the minutes? I see Sean's hand up.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes as documented.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you so much. And then so we have this evening presentations from two of our law enforcement agencies here in Anne Arundel County. The agenda previously stated 3 agencies. Unfortunately, there was a last-minute conflict of interest for the sheriff's office, and he sends his regrets, and we are working to reschedule that presentation at a PAB meeting in the near future. And so this evening we have the City of Annapolis Police Department, Chief Jackson, and then also the Anne Arundel County Police Department, Chief Alwood. Dr. Moore, see your hand raised.
Yes, Madam Chair. At the end of the meeting, our last meeting, we had said that we were going to do the comments in the beginning. Are we going to forego that?
So we said after the law enforcement presentations. Okay. So the plan was that after we get through the law enforcement presentations, so this would have been the last one, but I think we said after this meeting, we would do the law enforcement presentations and then allow public comment at the end, just to allow especially, folks to be able to comment on anything that they heard from the agencies. But then after this meeting, that we would go ahead and move the public comment to the beginning of the agenda.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, that was a good question, and that's a good reminder for the public, as we don't want them, to have to wait to provide public comment. The thought was that because these are law enforcement agencies, that it would be good to have the agencies present and then allow the members of the public to be able to respond if they wish, or if they have different comments that don't relate to the presentation, that they're able to do so. But yes, after this meeting, we agreed that we would move up the public comment to the beginning of the agenda. All right, so without further ado, I believe we have the Annapolis Police Department, Chief Jackson, up first, and the board had sent out various questions to each of the law enforcement agencies that they would be responding to. And so that will be part of the presentation. Welcome, Chief Jackson. You're on mute.
Good evening. This is Deputy Chief Branford. He's going to join us in a second, running a few seconds behind, so he should be here in about 2 or 3 seconds.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good evening, board. Thank you guys for allowing us to do this presentation for you. So first time seeing some of you. I do recognize some of you guys. Danny, classmate. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Just fine. So Chief Jackson should be here in a moment.
Okay, great. Oh, there you go. I was just going to let you know that your camera went off for momentarily, but we see you again. And thank you so much. So we look forward to Chief Jackson.
I
and
saw
as-
his name on there, but it looked
It
like
did, and it just
off.
popped off. So I don't know if that's something technical on our end or on his end. Zoom
There's
is
a
wonderful.
question in there from somebody about not having access to camera. I wonder if that's him.
Oh, okay.
It says anonymous attendee.
Should I be in another group? I don't have access to camera. Maybe that was Chief Jackson.
Yeah, I see him there now.
Yep, I see it.
And he's been updated to panelists, so there should not be an issue with the video.
Chief Jackson, hopefully you can hear us. Perhaps you, I don't know if you can unmute.
Give me 1 second. I'll run over and
Oh, no, it's saying it's Kim Jackson. Is that?
I'm on now.
Oh, there we go. There's Chief Jackson. And then your camera is off.
Yes, ma'am. I've been trying to fool with this since 6 o'clock, so I'm not
Oh,
actually,
so sorry.
but I tried to log in early. I was too early, then I logged in. I'm having problems with my video.
Okay.
Let me see. I don't know why, but I've had problems with this video the last couple days. I thought it was rectified, but apparently.
Do you have a laptop by chance?
I'm going to have to go to another office probably and sit.
Okay. I was just gonna say the laptops over on the top, they have like a slide that slides over the camera. So if that moves, that may be the video issue.
Because for some reason this is not working. This was like it last week. Oh,
There we
you go.
go. We see you. Welcome,
fix-
Chief Jackson. Thank you for being here
Thank
this
you.
evening.
Before I start anything, I'm proud of myself. The tech people couldn't fix it, and I'm technically challenged, but I fixed it, so I'm proud.
There
of
you go.
Chief Jackson, this is Jennifer. When you are ready to get started, I will share my screen with the presentation that you forwarded to me previously. And if you could just say next slide when you're ready, I will forward the slides for you.
Okay, I guess I'll get right to it.
Yep, and we'll take questions from board members at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, excuse my manners. Good evening, everybody. The Police Accountability Board, some of the faces I know. Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. Well, Annapolis Police Department, you can advance the next slide.
Hang on, I'm having issues with that. Oops,
Okay, I'll start off.
there we go.
Okay, I'll start off with our mission. And the Annapolis Police Department's mission is to protect life and property, prevent and reduce crime, maintain order, and enforce the law within our community, while protecting the constitutional rights and dignity of those we serve. You can advance the next slide.
I'm sorry, Chief. I don't know why I'm having difficulty with this. There we go.
Okay, and here's our vision statement. By the way, our mission statement kind of feeds into the vision statement. The vision statement is where we extrapolate our goals and objectives, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. But the Annapolis Police Department shall be an impartial and just partner to every citizen it serves, vigorously and constitutionally enforcing the law to protect its residents and others. We shall operate effectively, efficiently, ethically, and equitably, focused on community relationships. We shall exercise careful and faithful stewardship over the authority and economy given to us by the people. We shall earn and keep public trust, recognizing the department is more than merely a peacekeeping force. We will be a guide to those seeking pathways out of the criminal justice system and a helping hand to the homeless, the hungry, the mentally ill, and underprivileged. We shall be a listener to those seeking to be heard and a beacon of officer safety and wellness. Next slide. This is the structure of the Annapolis Police Department. Recently revised a couple of months ago. And of course, at the top of it is myself as the chief of police. And also in my office, it hasn't been filled yet. I've been very picky, probably some would argue too picky, but I haven't chosen my public information officer yet. That's pending. But Margaret Yu, her name is pronounced Yu, is my executive assistant. She runs my office. Without her, I don't know what I would do. Somebody else who is equally important, in fact, I would argue he's just a jewel to have, and he's not only my deputy chief, but he's a dear friend and confidant, and we're like brothers, and that's Major Stanley Branford. He's my deputy chief. We go way back to when both of us had black hair in Baltimore. Neither one of us have hair anymore, and a little bit we do have is gray, but he is my deputy chief, and he kind of runs the entire operation. He oversees the day-to-day operations of the Annapolis Police Department. And below him, the way our structure is divided up is we have a chief of patrol. He's Justin Kleindes. If you see to my far left, I would believe, maybe some of you are right. Justin Kleindes, he's a captain and my patrol commander, and right under him is a lieutenant. And that lieutenant's since been transferred, but the rank still holds true. And he's a commander for traffic, patrol traffic. Our SWAT team asset is the Annapolis Safety Enforcement Team, and traffic, our traffic division. And under him, he has Lieutenant Joseph Mann, and he's a shift commander for our patrol forces. And then we have acting Lieutenant Christian Tucker, who's a K-9 commander. And this has since been a change too. Nicole Vaden, we have to update the names. She's no longer there. She's working with Anne Arundel County with the crisis response team. She's working with Lieutenant Steve Thomas, and he's working with I'm sorry, I'm bad with names this evening, but Jen Corbin. I'm sorry, he's working with Steve Thomas and Jen Corbin, Lieutenant Steve Thomas and Jen Corbin with Anne Arundel County. So I think she's been replaced with acting sergeant, if I'm correct. Stan, help me out. She's been with is that Clement Agabahengbi?
No, Sergeant Becker is in that position, sir.
That's right, Sergeant Becker. That's right, Sergeant Becker. I'm sorry. Thank you. Like I said, I'm having a bad time with names. Sergeant Becker's now the new supervisor for community outreach, to include crisis intervention and crisis response, among other initiatives that we engage in. And so moving over, my captain in charge of operations, she's Amy Miguez. Just to show you the diversity of the Annapolis Police Department, Amy Miguez is about a 25-year veteran, give or take a year. She was recently promoted to captain a few months ago. We had no women captains when I first was appointed in July of 2019. So in the spirit of diversity and inclusion, we went out of our way to make sure we found a qualified, competent, and veteran police, and she's all of those. And so we're very happy and delighted to have Amy Miguez, one of the few women that the city of Annapolis has ever had to command a major part of the police department. So we're very proud of her. So she's a captain, and she's in charge of all of our criminal investigation, crimes against persons and crimes against property. That includes crimes against persons, homicide, first degree assaults, rapes, robberies. Those are all violent crimes, and also property crimes such as stolen vehicles and breaking and enterings, burglaries, thefts. All those fall under her, and she has 2 lieutenants who report directly to her, to include the drug unit and special investigations. We have a tremendous partnership with the federal government. Our federal partners have been tremendous. If you look down at the org chart, Acting Lieutenant Parker, he's since been replaced, I believe, by Ryan Holby. That was on the under Klondis. He's now the commander of the special investigations, and Sergeant Parker reports directly to him. And then many of you know Kevin Krause from being out in the community for a number of years, taking kids on fishing trips and camping trips and having the movie nights. Well, he's now going back to what he did years ago. He reports to Captain Miguez and helps her out with the investigation, particularly the homicides and the serious assaults and rapes. Then you move over to the next area, Dave Miguez. He is the husband of Amy Miguez, so a little bit of a family affair. He's an acting captain and my administrative commander. And under him is communications, records, and our coordinator for our education and training, Mark Cochran. He works with the Training Commission. He'll be an integral part of this police reform and the requirements set forth by the Police Reform Act and by the legislature, the new training that we must comply with. He'll be the point person to make sure that happens. He's also responsible for recruitment and purchasing and payroll. And then move on over, another one of very important person in the Indianapolis Police Department. Many of you know her because she represented me so many times when I was unable to be there, and that's Rhonda McCoy. She comes with a wealth of experience, a trained daughter. She worked under me when I was the Inspector General help in Baltimore with the paragraphs when they went into consent decree in the aftermath of the Freddie Gray in custody deaths back in 2015. We go way back. She's educated and she's pretty much an expert on policy. So she's doing policy. She's my internal affairs commander. She'll be working very closely with the Police Accountability Board. And she's also helped usher us into compliance with the new legislation. And then direct report to her up until recently was our accreditation manager, CLEAR. You see CLEAR down there. Of course, CLEAR is the acronym for Commission on the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. And that's a whole full-time job to keep us in compliance with the standards set forth by CLEAR. We just got back from the national conference, and I'm happy to report that we met all standards, and we was awarded our certificate with no conditions, which is extremely good. And my colleague Chief Alwood would tell you how hard that is to do. And then the last one is cold case. I started a cold case squad when I first got here. I promised the citizens at my confirmation and the mayor and city council that when people lost their loved ones, regardless of what the circumstances were, we would do our very best to solve the cases once they've gone cold through a whole nother process that I'll gladly explain more in depth. I know we don't have the time tonight, but we have a cold case squad, and that a very important component of that is just reaching out to the families to let them know that we haven't forgot their loved ones. And we have a system by where on the anniversary of their murder or their death, we reach out to them to follow up and to let them know that we haven't forgotten their case. You can move it to the next slide. Okay, personnel, Office of the Chief. We have 5 sworn people here to include my deputy chief and a few other people. And we have 2 civilians. In patrol, I'm authorized 124. That's another sworn. We're not operating at that. We're operating at about 110, somewhere around that. But we currently have in the patrol division, 60 sworn and 4 civilian. That's just in uniform patrol. In administration, we have 18 sworn and 28 civilian. Our operations division, we have 22 sworn and 3 civilian. And our professional standards, we have 2 sworn and 2 civilian. And all of those numbers need to be increased, but that's another presentation for another time. That's where we're currently at. You can advance the slide. Okay, the Annapolis Police Department Internal Investigation Command Structure. Of course, as the Chief of Police, I'm ultimately accountable for everything, but at the top as the Chief of Police. And then my second command is Major Stanley Branford. The third in command is our illustrious professional standards manager, Ms. Rhonda McCoy. And then under her is newly promoted, and boy, is this guy sharp, Lieutenant Andrew Ascione. He's our internal affairs commander. I think he has like a degree in physics, so his mind is very analytical, but that's the command structure for internal investigation. Next slide. Okay, the complaint investigations process. I don't know if many of you saw the story that they did on WBAL. Kyrie Stewart did a interview, I believe it was on June 22nd of this year, and we talked about being in compliance with some of the mandates of the Police Reform Act, and one of those was the website that we put up to explain to the citizens in the city of Annapolis how they can report file complaints, without even coming into the station. If they felt that they were more comfortable doing it from their computer at home, I explained to them what the process was and how it works. And here's kind of like a flow chart, if you will, of the process. Command receives complaint, conducts initial investigation. Then a complaint is initiated, either can walk in or they can do it through the Police Accountability Board. And if you look at the arrow, the little squiggly arrow, the complaint is received from Internal Affairs Command Portal or the PAB will walk in and it's assigned after that process, or walk in, it's assigned to be investigated. If you look at the other arrow, you'll see it's reviewed. The Commander of Professional Standards, that would be Rhonda McCoy, she would review it. Then the review committee offers an opinion. Then I get a review, and then it goes to the Administrative Charging Committee. Those are internal processes. You can go to the next one. Okay, Annapolis year-over-year crime statistics. I'll be very quickly, because I know I only have a few minutes, but if you look at this annual comparison, and I'm sure that this is accessible on the website, but you can see from 2009 to 2021, over a 10-year period, crime has consistently gone down in all categories, all violent crime. We no longer use the Uniform Crime Reports way of indexing crime and calculate numbers. We're now using NIBRS, and NIBRS is an acronym for National Incident-Based Reporting System. And under the old system, we had a hierarchy rule. In other words, one quick example, if you had a homicide and there were other things that led up to the homicide, then we count those crimes too. If a woman was walking down the street and a guy grabbed her and dragged in the bushes, we count that as an abduction. Then if he took a gold chain off of her neck, then we would count that as a robbery. Then if he raped her, we would count that as a rape. Then ultimately, if she got a good look at him and he wanted to silence her as a witness and he strangled her to death, then we would count the murder too. Now under NIBRS, under the old system, we would only count the homicide. So it wasn't a true and accurate depiction of crime, not only in the city of Annapolis, anywhere. But if you look over to the far right of your screen, you'll see 20 to 21 change. And you'll see just about every category, with the exception of aggravated assaults and shots fired, are up. Those are the only two categories up. Everything else, you'll see minuses, from homicide to forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault. I'm not aggravated assault, I'm sorry, robbery, on down the line. Our property crime, burglary, theft, and motor vehicle theft are all down. And all property crimes down 9%, and violent crimes down 4%. The only shootings are down 29%. The only category that you see where there's a heavy increase, 80%, is that's the shots fired. But of course, we have the shot spotter now, so it more accurately records and identify where shots are coming from. So you would have more than just depending on human beings to dial 911. You can advance the slide. Annapolis Police Department year-over-year internal complaints. We went back as far as 2011, I believe, was what you asked for. And if you look, in 2011, you had 7 complaints, 2012, 11, 2013, 21, 2014, 26, 2015, 12, 2016, 23, 2017, 26, 2018, 32. Now, I arrived in 2019, July 31st of 2019. You'll see the complaints have increased 46, and in 2020, 38, and in 2021, 29. Now, you can analyze this or interpret this trend any kind of way you want. I would like to think that we have a more open police department, a more transparent police department since the in custody death of George Floyd a few months ago, or a couple of years ago, I'm sorry, in Indianapolis, St. Paul. And just us being accountable to the community, people were more apt and more comfortable to want to report police misconduct. And then a lot of it's generated internally. I'll say that a lot of our complaints are generated from supervisors taking the appropriate action when need be. So that's just my interpretation of it, the way I analyze the numbers. But from 2019 to 2021 is during my tenure as police chief. You can advance the slide again. Any questions? Oh, one more thing if I have time. I was asked, I noticed that I read the second email, and this only take 10 seconds, but they were asking for a 5-year overview. I can just give you aggregate numbers of the number of complaints that were sustained and versus exonerated. And I'll run through this real quickly. In 2017, we had 7 sustained complaints, 4 exonerated. 2018, we had 10 sustained, 8 exonerated. 2019, we had 27 sustained. Again, that was my first year here. And the punishments range from reprimands to termination. We had 7 exonerated. In 2020, we had 18 sustained, and we had 6 exonerated. We had a termination and 4 letters of reprimand. And in 2021, we had 6 sustained, and we had a termination and a letter of reprimand. We've had about 5 or 6 terminations. I made the decision to terminate about 5 people since I've been here. One individual was criminally charged for gross non-feasance in office and malfeasance in office. First time it's ever been done in Annapolis, but that was a way to demonstrate that we are serious about the overall integrity of how we operate as a law enforcement agency. Thank you for indulging me for that. I think I've tried to cover everything that you asked for.
Thank you so much, Chief Jackson. We appreciate you providing that overview. Now we'll go to board member questions. If any board members have questions, if you could please use the raise hand function at the bottom. It's under reactions. There's different reactions, but you'll click on the raise hand and your hand will be raised, and then I can call on folks. I see Dr. Ashworth's hand raised.
Good evening. How you doing? Thank you for that very thorough report. But I do have a question. Have there been any referrals that have come in for 2022?
I believe since the portal's been raised, if I'm understanding your question, I believe we had one, and that was, and Rhonda McCoy can help me out. It was kind of funny. I think that wasn't even related to, it was about one person complaining against another person. So the appropriate action would have been to file a police report. It had nothing to do with misconduct of police so far.
That is correct, Chief. So one complaint came through the portal, citizen on citizen, not complaint on police.
But we have, and just to clarify, we actually have a complaint that came, 2 complaints currently that will be going to the ACC. And that was generated from persons not going to the portal, but, making their complaint directly with our agency.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I see Anne's hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment in reference to when I looked at the chart, it seemed as if there was just one person for the cold case squad. So it seems like with, you know, the advance in technologies that they would have more than the one there. Just a sidebar.
Oh, well, when I presented, and I'm agreeing with you, I said that all those numbers need to be increased. And I think you guys asked me to do a SWOT analysis, which I didn't talk about, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's one of the weaknesses is that, but that's across the board unilaterally. The Annapolis Police Department, I've said it to the mayor privately, and then I've come out publicly as a police chief and said that the Annapolis Police Department needs to be expanded, given the times that we're living in. We're too small. And the formula that we use is by act of an ordinance that says we should have 3.2 officers for every 1,000 residents in the city of Annapolis based on US Census data. The problem with that is it doesn't give a rationale for the 3.2. You know, I try to say this with a straight face. I'm looking at my deputy chief. That's a kind of private joke, but I always ask the question, what is 0.2 of an officer? I have a little tiny officer on my credenza, and I call him 0.2 because mathematically, either you have a half officer or a whole officer. I've never seen a half officer, and I've been a policeman for 40 years. I've never seen a half officer. So I understand math is math, but we're talking about human resources. And I say all that to say is that our cold case squad is very important. We're clear accredited, and I think that it legitimizes a police department because at the core, what we do is to protect life and property. And when people lose a loved one to murder or violent death at the hands of another, and we run out of investigative leads, we need a team of people. So yes, ma'am. I say all that to say is that I'm agreeing with you that we need more people, but we have a sergeant and an investigator, and they do a hell of a job, just those two. And prayerfully in the future, as we create the value for the Annapolis Police Department. I'm a firm believer of that. I learned that in graduate school. You got to create the public value. And that's my job, is to create the value. I'm hoping that with your support, that we will, the county and the city's support, that we'll be able to grow our cold case squad.
And can I add to that also, Chief?
Mm-hmm.
So the cold case squad, as you said, ma'am, technology has grown. We have used all that technology. We are connected with various groups across the country, especially technology as it deal with DNA. Part of the cold case, and we didn't have a cold case unit when the chief got here, and the reason why he brought me in, I'm a two-time commander of the homicide unit. We do have 2 people in that position. And also part of the cold case unit is not just to solve cold cases, but to have frequent contact with victims and with victims' families. Prior to 2019, when a case went cold, most often families complain of never hearing anything else about their loved ones since the first days when it occurred. We created a system that we frequently make contact with victims' families. We give them updates. We bring them in for updates within their cases. We have an annual callback to make sure that families know that we have not forgotten their loved one. We're going to start a letter that goes out from the chief. Right now, we do it by way of phone contact. Any family who wants an update on their loved one case is welcome to ask for a review. We bring them in. We open up the case folder. We go through the entire case folder with them. Oftentimes, we find that some of the problems in those cases was lack of contact between the investigator and the family members. We learned that the family members often think that nothing was done, and we can show them there has been, and they have information that they never shared with us because of lack of trust. Now, since time has gone by and we brought them in, they do trust us and share that information. Oftentimes, we're able to give them information that they never had before. So we try to manage their expectations. It's not only to solve cases, but also make them comfortable and let them know that we have not forgotten their loved one.
And I'll just add one more thing to that. Aside from deoxyribonucleic acid, also known as DNA, and other forms of trace evidence, prosecutors need witnesses. There's still, regardless of technology, prosecutors still want people to get on the stand and testify to the evidence. And so what we're also doing is everything that my deputy chief said, because he is my resident expert in sudden death investigation. He's absolutely right. The only other thing that I would add to that is that we need to find a way to get the public more engaged. If we treat them right, and their encounters with the Police Accountability Board is minimized, and we treat them right, and they know that we care about them and treat them like the citizens that they deserve to be treated like, then when somebody does commit a real crime, then witnesses will come forth as a matter of bridging that trust factor. So,
and one more thing to add to that, not to be ping-ponging with the chief, evidence of what the chief just said is last year we had 5 homicides and we solved every last one of them as a result of community engagement.
Thank you so much. I see Barney's hand up.
Yeah, Chief, I have a question for you. One of the slides showed you as the individual who would be receiving the complaints or making an initial assessment on the complaint. I think that was slide 4. Can you do all those complaints that come to you make their way into the system, or do you decide whether in fact they do or do not warrant further investigation?
Both. We never turn down an investigation unless there's no lawful reason to do so. And I say come through me, it comes through the portal, if you will. I'm just the chief of police, but it comes through the portal. It's all digitized. It's all comes through a software system that we have in place, and then those complaints are evaluated. And an example of that would have been the one that I said that one citizen wanted to make a complaint of another. And when I did the promotion for it on WBAL, she interpreted apparently that all complaints would come through there, even if they were non-police related. And so what we did, we didn't dismiss that complaint. We just put it where it should have been. She should have called 911 and said, my neighbor kicked my dog, and then I want to make up a police report. So no complaint gets ignored. Every complaint is evaluated. And we're prepared to be extremely transparent. Nobody can say that we dismiss the complaint. Now, sometimes we may have to, as a point of clarification, sometimes the complaint has no legal basis. It's just frustration. It's seeking information, and we let them know that as well. But every complaint is investigated and or evaluated.
And one of the other things that the chief does that's very important, not just the complaint to come in, but the conduct of the investigation and the action taken by the investigators, because the chief and myself can look at the investigation and go back and suggest that some things need to be done before it get forwarded. So the chief definitely scrutinized the investigators, the process in which they investigate, and what the outcome of that investigation is, just in case something was missed or overlooked.
That's right, Stan. So what I don't catch, Stan usually catch, or Rhonda catches. It's a fairly decent system. Of course, anything can be improved upon, but yeah, thanks for that, Stan. That's an important point.
Mr. Gomez, when we say, and I just wanted to add, that the slide that has command, that command is the lower command. So it can be it can come in from like the operations commander, like maybe a sergeant or someone got a complaint, or it came in from the portal. If it was a walk-in, then they would investigate it. They would do an initial investigation, and then they would forward it to IA, and then it would make its way through the channels. It would come to IA, then we would, assign the case, an investigator. It would get investigated, and then it would come to me for the review. Chief Jackson is the final arbiter. So once it makes it through me, there's a review committee. The review committee is myself, it's Major Branford, and it's the commanding officer. And we'll sit down and we'll, render a finding. I will have, or the investigator will have given recommendations for a finding, whether it was sustained, that we believe it was sustained, or unfounded, or exonerated, or not sustained. And then we would send that review up. And as Chief Jackson said, sometimes he'll come back, just like your administrative charging committee will probably do, and want more information. Say, I want you to go back and look at this. I want you to do more work in that. Or he might just sign it and say, yes, I agree with your findings and the conclusion. And then, he will, we will recommend a discipline, and, he is the final arbiter on the discipline.
And keep in mind, like anything else, sometimes you'll get a call, and Rhonda McCoy and Stan can attest this, any policeman really who's ever worked the job, things not always what they appear. Sometimes something is entered into the system one way. There may be things like an officer failed to show up for lineup or roll call, but out of that investigation we may discover information that should go before the accountability board. In other words, it gets exponentially more serious, and it goes outside the realm of just handling internal discipline, and should be brought to the attention of the charging committee and accountability board. So we are mindful of that as well. And that's why we have the blue team system that deals mostly with internal complaints generated by supervisors. And then we have the portal that citizens can come in off the street if they feel uncomfortable, because a lot of citizens are intimidated to want to come into a police station. And I guess that's part of the spirit of the legislation, that we give them avenues to file complaints that's more comfortable for them, if that makes sense.
All righty,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. And we only have like 3 more minutes before we have the county. So Sarah is up next. I don't know if we'll be able to get to our 2 other board members. And if we don't, we can certainly email questions to the chief so that we can get answers. Sarah, thank you.
And I'll try to answer them quickly.
Yes, sir. So I guess I have a really easy question, and you almost addressed it. The complaints that aren't major, maybe minor complaints that don't warrant a full investigation. Maybe sergeant is called to the scene. Maybe it's something that didn't happen the way it appeared, and the shift commander can handle it, or somebody on scene can handle it. Are you documenting those?
Absolutely. I don't want that kind of trouble. So absolutely.
Are you documenting them in a database on paper, or is it just a code and then move on? Like, is there a paper trail?
It should be a paper trail.
It's documented in a database.
Right, in the database.
It's documented in a database, and I want to be clear that any case, if it involves a citizen, from July 1st on, will go to the ACC.
Right.
Any case.
Perfect,
but anything that's documented as misconduct, even if it's internal, it's documented, should I be asked.
Thank you so much. Kimberly, I see your hand up.
So I put my questions in the chat too, just because I had a few to follow up, and you may have touched upon this, but I wanted to ask, and if I missed this, I apologize. What is the standard of review for complaints is my first question. Second question is, how long has there been an online access portal for complaints? And then I was curious to know what effect, if any, does a negative finding for a complaint have on the officer's collective bargaining position? And then I had a different question about rape cases.
So let's try to get through the first couple, because it's 7:14 and we have Chief Alwood coming up. And then if we can't get to the rest, if we can get written responses, that would be great. Thank you.
I don't know any way to answer. They're all good questions, don't get me wrong, but they require a more comprehensive response. If you don't mind, I can email you the answer and say, I'm so sorry we can't do it in this forum, but the questions are very, very comprehensive, and I don't know how to answer them in just a couple of sound bites.
No, that sounds great. You can send an email to our executive director, Jansen, and if he can put his email so that way all the board members can get the responses, that would be excellent. Thank you so much.
And between Stan and Rhonda McCoy, us 3 here today, we'll get your question answered, Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, Ms. Jackson, can you send us an email so we make sure we understand your question clearly, and then we'll respond back, please?
Yeah, so why don't we do this? Kimberly put her question in the chat box. So we'll have Jansen reach out to you all with the questions, and that way he can get the response and make sure that the full board has the answers. And Danny, I know, has questions as well. So Danny, if you can get those to Jansen as well,
Will do.
and that way he can do follow-up, if that's
Sure.
okay with everyone. That works. Excellent. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you all being here this evening and providing such detailed overview and responses to questions. And we certainly look forward to the answers to Kimberly's questions, Danny's questions, and we look forward to future collaboration with you. Thank you so much. You are welcome to stay on, or you can log off as we have Anne Arundel County Police Department.
Okay,
Up
thank
next.
you. And I
Have a
apologize
good
to
evening.
Mr. Watkins and Ms. Jackson again. Have a good evening.
No,
Thank
it's
you
fine.
so much.
Fine. I appreciate great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Hi, Chief Awad.
All right, so welcome Chief Alwood to the Police Accountability Board meeting. We really appreciate you taking the time this evening to provide the board with an overview on the Anne Arundel County Police Department. So welcome, and you may begin. We will take board member questions at the end of your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening to
Quickly,
the.
Chief, if I could just jump in really quick. I'm having a difficult time promoting your executive command staff to panelist. I'm not sure why.
In full transparency, everyone is in the room. So if I need to point to any
They're
one
right.
of them.
Fantastic. Okay,
We didn't want the feedback.
I'm going to pull up your slides. Let me know when you're ready for them. And then as you're ready to change to the next slide, just let me know and I'll take care of that for you.
Absolutely. So I have a bit of enough introductory remarks. I'll try not to be too long, but officially, good evening to the executive director, Evelyn, the chair, Ortiz, and esteemed members of the Police Accountability Board. Obviously, you know my name. My name's Amal Alwood, and it's my honor to serve as Chief of Police here in Anne Arundel County. And I thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. More importantly, thank you for your time, your investment, your service, and commitment to creating a police accountability disciplinary process during one of the most critical times in police history. It's imperative the new laws passed by the General Assembly in 2021 and 2022 provide a fair, impartial, and objective process. During a time when retirements and resignations in law enforcement are at an all-time high, and recruitment is at an all-time low, it's essential for public safety and our community safety that we get this right. And I think we're off to a great start. In the more than 30 years of policing, in my background, having served in 3 law enforcement agencies, I've witnessed an unequaled evolution in professional policing standards. For example, your Anne Arundel County Police Department, just as Annapolis City, is accredited by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, also known as CALEA. And CALEA requires agencies to meet an established set of professional standards subjected to continuous audit. We've been accredited by the Commission since 1994, and we are one of only 32 Maryland agencies to maintain this accreditation, and one of only 945 police departments in the US. That's huge. Only 1% of the more than 18,000 police departments in our country possess this accreditation. This gold standard in public safety serves as a source of pride for Anne Arundel County. Our CALEA certification has led to the adoption of more than 600 professional standards by the Anne Arundel County Police Department. And it requires on-site and remote site inspections every 4 years and every year respectively. Upon conclusion of our last on-site visit, which was last year, the assessors closed our exit interview with the following words: "We need more Anne Arundels." That was both humbling, but also very telling to the professionalism of the men and women of this highly regarded police department. Also of note, our department adopted all of the recommendations from the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing to include the 6 pillars. And you all are familiar with the 6 pillars. building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer safety and wellness. I point to the first and last because to me, those are the most important of the 6. This evening's presentation is designed to provide a high-level overview. I won't get granular. I'm not that good. This is a pretty big department. We're one of the big 7, so bear with me. That's why I have my friends in the room with me. But you'll see our organizational structure, arrest and use of force data, calls for service, internal investigative processes, and a myriad of community engagement programs. We look forward to your questions and feedback as we collectively endeavor to make Anne Arundel County the best place for all. If I may just take a moment before we get started. Actually, we can go to the next slide, please. Jennifer, could you go to the next slide, please? Could you start the slide? And here you'll see our departmental organization chart. At the top is my office, Office of the Chief of Police. And around me, you see the very few folks who directly report to me. I have my Chief of Staff in the room with me, Dave Morris, my Senior Advisor, Mr. Bill Lowry. My Executive Assistant, Justin, is not in the room with us tonight. I have with me Lieutenant Schultz, who is the commander of our Office of Professional Standards, and our Audits and Inspections Unit Supervisor, Sergeant Aaron Brandt, along with Deputy Chief Fred Plitt, who oversees our Bureau of Administration and our Bureau of Operations and Investigations. Deputy Chief Gerard Flemings is not present tonight. He is on approved leave. We use that occasionally. And he oversees our Bureau Patrol and our Bureau of Community Services. And I have also in the room with me, Major Katie Goodwin, who oversees under Deputy Chief Flemings, the Bureau of Community Services and all the respective units that come under that. Again, the department is large enough. You can take a look at the org chart. I'm not going to go too granular with the org chart. What I will say is our police officers work diligently to safeguard Anne Arundel County. Please know that as command staff, we meet regularly with our patrol officers and encourage them to continue to police from their hearts, to police ethically, constitutionally, and with empathy and compassion, encouraging them to treat everyone with dignity and respect. Their hard work is one of the many reasons that last year we experienced an 11% reduction in our serious crimes. And that's huge. When we personally witnessed other jurisdictions, whether locally or nationally, experiencing exponential increases in violent crime, that was not the case here in Anne Arundel County. So we're very grateful for our police officers, and just know that all of our resource allocation and patrol response and deployment is based on data-driven information analysis, and then identified by what we consider heat maps or hotspots. I just wanted to share that bit of information with you, and just to provide some context on some of the training. I think I should highlight that now. We're one of 3 agencies in the state of Maryland who has a partnership with 2 professors, Dr. Sharita Jacobs Thompson and Dr. Bernard Demzik. They host a guided tour at the National African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The tour is law enforcement specific, and they journey with us, we journey with them on discussions and a tour that takes us from the transatlantic slave trade onto our shores and then up to contemporary policing. It's a very phenomenal, profound experience for all of us. Our recruits go through it. COVID negatively impacted it. It paused us for a moment, but in the interim, we had them come in and speak with our officers on equity, diversity, inclusion, those various topics, race, various topics that sometimes folks may shy away from. They facilitated those conversations with our officers from the perspective of internal relations and external relations. And I firmly believe that how we interact and treat one another internally is reflective of how we treat everyone once we leave the walls of any of our buildings. So that I just feel like it's critical to state that. And then just two more trainings that I'd like to highlight. ABLE training, if you've heard of it, is active bystandership in law enforcement. Essentially, a component of it is the duty to intervene. There's a mental wellness component in there as well, but all of our officers have been trained, in ABLE training. And then lastly, I thought it was important that we bring in subject matter experts from academia to help us educate our officers on the subjects of implicit bias and also customer service. So Dr. Chris Marsh from the University of Maryland has partnered with us to provide that training as well. So we're very proud not only of the work our officers perform, but of the training that we add in addition to the multitude of training that we're required to complete every year. And I will go to the next slide. All right, this slide is specific to the number of arrests from January 1, 2018 till June 30th of 2022. Overall, our total arrests for a 5-year period total 54,337 arrests. Force was used in 556 of these arrests, and that equates to force used in 0.01 of total arrests over a 5-year period. You can look at there's data on there from the state compared to Anne Arundel County, and you can see that, compared to state data, we're in a pretty good place in terms of the numbers of arrests. Next slide. And the next slide highlights the demographics. You'll find that 72% of the individuals we arrest are male, 27% are women, and 49% are white, and 47% are Black, with the lower numbers being either the races unknown, Asian Pacific Islander, or Hawaiian. The most common age range is ages 24 to 31. And use of force reports include those requiring anything above unresisted handcuffing, for example, physical escort, joint manipulation, takedown, up to use of impact weapons and firearms. And if we could go to the next slide. Here we have our heat maps, and you'll find calls for service related to arrests and traffic stops. So again, when we receive calls for service, they're generated by our, residents, visitors, et cetera, of course. You'll see the vast majority of those calls come from what's our northern, eastern, and western districts. And you'll find that the majority of our arrests are occurring within those same areas. And you see our traffic stop information. Okay, that's not included, I apologize. At any rate, if you were to see that information, it includes or pretty much covers the same areas. So where we're conducting all of our activity, whether it's a call for service, arrest location, or traffic stop, we're being driven there by the data. Next slide, please. So over this 5-year period, our officers responded to more than 1.5 million calls for service. Of those calls, officers made the 54,000 plus arrests that we just discussed, and that equates to 0.035% of those contacts. Officers reported a total, again, of 556 use of force incidents. That equates to 0.00036% of calls for service. And of those 556 incidents, 56 allegations of excessive force were reported, and that equates to 0.00036% of those calls for service. It's important to note that use of force reporting does not necessarily equate to reporting of excessive force. Keep in mind that when using force, an officer is responding to a subject's active resistance or force being used on the officer. Allegations of excessive force over this 5-year period amount to those 56 incidents, and that equates to an average of 11.2 excessive force complaints per year. 22 cases involved no follow-up from complainants after our internal affairs unit made contact with complainants and provided them with appropriate resources to advance their cases. 7 of those cases were exonerated, the officer was exonerated. In 9 of those cases, the case was concluded unfounded, 2 were sustained, and 4 were not sustained. If we could go to the next slide. We have the use of force demographics of force used. 46, almost 47% of the individuals were white, 47% are Black, and the remaining lower numbers are Asian or unknown. 85% are males and 14% are females. Again, the vast majority, I mean, you can see the charts, the vast majority of these incidents involve the use of either an officer's hands or feet. So also of note, you'll see that the use of force reporting numbers will rise in coming years, and that's because of the legislative changes implemented by the General Assembly with the new law and the change of the standard from the Supreme Court standard of objective reasonableness to necessary and proportional, which requires that control methods, restraint techniques, and pain compliance absent any injury must be reported. And that wasn't the case in the past. It doesn't mean that the use of force is not justified. It means that we must report use of force incidents not previously defined as use of force. Okay. If we could go to the next slide, please. So, complaint process. So, and it's, you can read for yourself, you can see that community members may file a complaint in any of the following 6 ways, whether it's through our public portal, which is new, the Police Accountability Board, by email, in writing, in person, or by phone. And then the policy, if community members wish to file a complaint, either in person or by telephone, against an employee, there's obviously a protocol. The employee's immediate supervisor, if that person is available, will take the complaint. If not, an on-duty supervisor. And if that person's not available, the senior ranking officer. But the law allows for any employee to receive the complaint, but that's the order that we will use. Obviously, we operate with a chain of command, but we do receive all complaints. Next slide. And again, this is our agency complaint process. So all self-explanatory, I'll just read through it. All complaints are reviewed by the Office of Professional Standards. and assigned to investigators accordingly. Again, Lieutenant Schultz is the person that receives those complaints. The most serious incidents are handled by our internal affairs unit, and you can see that covers cases of excessive force, integrity, bias-based policing, corruption, and misconduct. Again, the more egregious violations, potentially even criminal law violations. Other incidents may be assigned to a district commander for investigation that involve courtesy or performance that isn't such a serious violation of departmental policy or the law. The commander of our Office of Professional Standards reviews all the investigative findings with me, and moving forward beyond July 1, that file, once it's completed, is forwarded to the Administrative Charging Committee for disciplinary recommendation according to the matrix. And then, as is the case, if a district commander handles the investigation, the same applies. He would consult with me for final discipline. Next slide. So agency complaint findings. Previously, we had 4 categories that we would determine were at the conclusion of an investigation. An employee would a complaint would either be sustained, non-sustained, the employee would be exonerated, or the case would be determined unfounded. With the legislative changes, the employee or the investigation would either be considered administratively charged or administratively not charged. I mean, it doesn't get any more simple than that. A shortcoming we see is there's no gray area in there, so it's pretty rigid. And you may see that come up as you begin to look at these cases. Next slide. Set our complaint summary. So without getting too granular, I'll just briefly go over the fact that over that 5-year period, we conducted a total of 356 internal and external complaints. 201 of those complaints were generated internally. We do self-assess, self-report, and 155 of those complaints were generated by citizens. The vast majority of the complaints, as you can see, were related to an officer's performance or duty, which may or may not have been a violation of policy. And then 131 were generated internally, where 31 were generated by citizens. Conduct unbecoming and use of force followed when considering the top 3 classifications for departmental violations. Next slide. Complaint investigative findings. Oh, I'm sorry, not the next slide, previous slide. The bottom part outlines the investigative findings. So it outlines the total sustained complaints, 192, 160 of those cases were internal complaints, 32 were citizen complaints. And then the non-sustained complaints equated to 85, 36 of which were internal and 49 which were citizen complaints. And my apologies. If we can move to the next slide and talk about one of the things we do very well. As you may or may not be aware, last year we created our new Community Services Bureau. Reflecting on our org chart, in the past, we had 3 bureaus. That was the Administrative Bureau, Operations and Investigative Bureau, and Patrol. But understanding how we have evolved as a community and in the consideration of the importance of building relationships with community and fulfilling the tenets of 21st century policing, we felt it was a priority to take our community services resources and create a bureau. That's how serious we are about building our relationships with our community. It demonstrates our commitment in investing with fostering relationships, one person at a time. I will skip to our crisis intervention, crisis response team. You heard Chief Jackson speak to Lieutenant Steve Thomas and Jen Corman. This team is invaluable. We continue to receive an influx of calls for people in either emotional behavioral distress. Mr. Pittman has supported us in increasing the staffing on our crisis intervention team. They're recognized internationally by CIT International. We were the crisis intervention team of the year. They're often sought after by agencies throughout the region to either help assist them with critical incidents, helping officers process trauma, or standing up their very own crisis intervention teams. We also increased staffing in our PAC units at each of the 4 districts. And our PACT units are community police officers. They collaborate with our residents on the resolution of neighborhood issues, not only problems, but there's also engagement with them. They participated in more than 488 meetings, events, initiatives so far this year, year to date. That's huge. We have an ongoing collaboration with our faith-based organizations with food distribution. Fresh Start is pre-arrest diversion. There's so many programs I could highlight, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip right to our youth activity programming. And again, just throughout the calendar year, I can't even name or number the amount of time we invest with our young people. And lastly, the one thing I really want to highlight that we're doing differently is we're getting out into the community. We don't advertise it. We consult with district commanders and we go out to each of the 4 districts. We conduct neighborhood knock and talks so that we're able to have face-to-face engagement with our residents so they get to meet us. We get to hear from them, any concerns they may have, all with the intent of developing a rapport so that one, they know that we're readily accessible to them, but 2, so that they could later on attend, begin attending our community meetings. Our community meetings within all 4 districts, are open to all, and enough folks don't know about it. So it's also our attempt to have that personal touch on inviting folks in. These are just a few services we offer. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be very quick. The Police Accountability Board SWOT analysis, what we see is strengths. I'm sorry, can you advance? Oh, I'm sorry. I should pay attention to the photos. There's some of the photos of some of the events. If we could just keep going, scrolling and get to the Police Accountability Board SWOT page, thank you. The strengths we identified, obviously the new process provides for enhanced transparency across the board, reinforcing the first and second pillars of 21st century policing, building trust and legitimacy in policy and oversight. What we see as a potential weakness is there may be a learning curve for non-public safety professionals, understanding the role of the patrol officer in the community, and the lack of command level or departmental subject matter expertise in the process. We understand we're not included in that process. And that's okay. I think you all will get through everything, but we do see that just as a potential weakness. The opportunities, this process has a potential to build stronger relationships with the community and the community's trust. And we're confident that it will only get better. Just assessing and recalling our most recent community survey conducted by Johns Hopkins University, it was highly favorable. We know the community appreciates and loves our police officers. The threats, concern from the officers, obviously that they will receive a fair, impartial, and objective process as it relates to disciplinary action. Also on the next slide, you'll find helpful links if you need to link up to our Facebook page, our website, the complaints or compliments portal, and our departmental policies. And with that, I thank you for your time. Any questions?
Great, thank you so much for that very comprehensive overview of your police department. We really appreciate it. It was very informative. So now we will go to board member questions. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function that you can find in the bottom right. If you click on the reactions tab there. And I'm going to let Danny and Kimberly jump in first if they have any questions, since they missed out on the last time. So I see Danny's hand. Thank you.
I will go first then. I'll kind of build on my question I had for the city, but I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. It was very, very good, very thorough. Is there a differentiator? Can we be sure that the data that we see in the Annapolis area is completely isolated from the city's data, or is there any redundancy in that data for the crime statistics specifically? And then I was also, there's not, okay, cool.
No.
And then the other question I just had was, is there any demographic data we have related to the excessive force complaints specific to the victim of it versus, or just a generic, is that data collected anywhere besides, you know, obviously like complaints about demeanor and stuff is one thing, but the force different.
Yes, and that's something we could follow up with you on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? I have a couple I wanted to ask, but I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. Okay. So some questions that have come up with regards to, so in the slide that showed the map with kind of like the hot spots, I think it was arrests first or calls for service. Is that the correct slide? So there's a question regarding the correlation of that map and where populations of color live in Anne Arundel County. And so, you know, what is the correlation between that map and our populations and demographics of the county?
So I know that we have populations within the Northern District, Eastern District, and specific locations within the Western District. That's something, again, we can get to you and related to that question. You heard me mention Dr. Chris Marsh. I've asked her, as I have in my previous role in another jurisdiction, to help us look at the data to make sure that, you know, we feel like we're policing ethically, constitutionally, professionally, with consideration for, you know, equity. But it isn't worth taking it is worth taking a second look at or a deeper dive, and she's willing to help us look at that information.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's good to know. And then another question relates to the data on, this is a twofold question. So on the arrest data, so Anne Arundel population is roughly 72% white and roughly 19% Black, but the arrest data is almost equal as far as Black and white arrests. So I think it was 47% and about 47% white, Black residents and 49% white residents. So obviously in comparison, there's a disproportionality there in comparison to the makeup of Black residents in the county. And so I imagine that's something that you would then be looking at to kind of try to understand that disproportionality as part of the work with Dr. Marsh.
Absolutely, but I also ask you to look back at the arrest data when compared to the state, and we are vastly lower. I will say, when you look at the types of arrests, enough of them are either on view arrests, meaning someone has committed something in front of a police officer, and warrants. Warrant services lead us, and when there's an open warrant for whatever the violation, the officer must make an arrest. So, but again, we can still look at that data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And then part of that, so I didn't see the demographics broken down by Latino population in the county. So obviously that can be, or Hispanic, I like to say Latino, that could be white, Black, mixed. So do you also collect that data as well to be able to break down the Latino population in Anne Arundel County?
Yeah, we do now in the state. So I think in the past, the state wasn't populating or collecting that information. And so
Okay.
now that is the case.
Okay.
So we should see it in next year's.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for answering my questions. Did anybody else have questions for the chief? No. Well, thank you so much for being with us and your team this evening. It was really great having you here and providing this very detailed information. I was particularly excited to hear about the training that you're doing with the professors and with the African American History Museum. And you know, that's really, to me, that's really innovative. And I think that's something that, you know, all police departments should really look at. That's really interesting. So I'd love to hear a little bit more at a later time as it relates to that. And so, but thank you so much. And we look forward to working with you and your team as we move forward in implementing the new state law. And we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
I appreciate your time and thank you all for taking on this role. We understand how critical the role is and we understand it's going to be a huge investment on your part. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good evening.
Thanks to you too.
Good night.
But before you go, Chief, how are you doing? Madam Chair, was there any opportunity for any questions from the public, or was this just, were these questions just going to be from members of the PAB?
So for this evening, we were doing board. That's how we've done it, I think, for the other meetings. But I think in the future, certainly, that might be an opportunity to have questions from the public to the law enforcement agencies.
Okay. Well, I won't pose a question, but there was a question from a member of the public that I will send over to the chief so that they can generate a response, and I can also in turn send that to the send that response to the community members that posed that question. I think that's fair and sufficient to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard.
Sure, that sounds good.
Certainly, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good night all.
Good night. All right, so I think we were scheduled to have a break, but we had some good presentations, some good discussion and questions. So is there consensus for us to skip our 10-minute break and just keep pushing through the agenda? Yes, okay, I see now. All right, so we will continue on. So I don't think the rest of these discussions will probably generate as much conversation. So one thing that we need to, so this was our last meeting that was already pre-scheduled. And so in accordance with the new state law, we are required to meet quarterly at a minimum. At the first meeting, I think we discussed that we probably will be meeting a little bit more than that, just given the fact that we're brand new and we have to appoint an ACC and, you know, receive a lot of information overview. We're learning, right? We're receiving information. And so one of the things that was previously discussed was having a meeting once a month. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there to the board members to see if that's something that we folks are agreeable to, for us to continue meeting once a month for the foreseeable future, probably, you know, in the next at least 6 months, maybe for the rest of the, you know, the full year that we've been aboard, so that we can be sure that we are able to get up to date and have, you know, information, whether it's from the law enforcement agencies. We've talked about having community groups and community members come before us, et cetera. Does that seem like something folks can do? Yes? Okay,
I think.
all right. I see Sean's hand up.
Yes, I agree with that. I guess my only thought is, we're getting ready to go into September. And my thought is if there's any complaints that have come through that need to be reviewed, that before we start our month, do we need to meet more, than the once a month to catch up from any complaints that may have come in July, if there needs to be reviewed? That's my only thought.
Yeah, so that I think that's a really good point and question. So the complaints are confidential complaints. And so right now, one of the things I know some other board members and myself have questions about that process. So we're trying to work through that to figure out what would be the most efficient, confidential way to ensure that board members are seeing the complaints, that are coming in from the law enforcement agencies. As we know, in accordance with the law, they have to send it. They receive a complaint, they send it to us within 3 days. If we receive a complaint, we send it to them within 3 days. So I think those are the details that we're looking to work out. And so I have sort of a vision of how I think, if we could technologically able to have, whether it's a database, an internal one or an external one, where these come in and that board members would be able to view, as we wouldn't be taking actions on these, but certainly would have access to the initial complaints. And then, of course, the agency conducts its investigation and that gets forwarded to the ACC. So that has not been established as of yet, but certainly something that we are looking to work towards, and we'll chat further about how we would like to see that process.
And if I can just quickly add, Madam Chair, I think it's a great question, Ms. Ashworth, but I think because we have this board is volunteer and we have email addresses that are disparate, we want to make sure that the emails and any communications that are sharing that level of information is protected, confidential. So yes, as Madam Chair noted, we are still trying to ensure that we have the appropriate level of, and all options on the table, including potentially issuing county email addresses. So those are the things that we're thinking through to ensure that it's going to be safe and secure.
Yeah, absolutely, because confidentiality is so important with these. And so, but yeah, that is definitely being worked on. Staff is looking into that behind the scenes. So that shouldn't impact our meetings. Once it's in place, then we would just have access to that information and however it is being shared with the board. Does that make sense? Okay, I see Dr. Moore.
Madam Chair, just for a point of clarity, we know that we're going to be meeting every Thursday as well. I believe the vast majority of us are attending the Citizens Academy starting in September. So we have every Thursday, and then we have the ride along that's going to be scheduled. And then we have the subcommittee meetings. And I'll be where I need to be, and I'm sure we will be where we need to be. But we're going to be a lot of places over the next 3 months.
Yes, thank you.
For thought in our planning.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. And I think that's why, we had back-to-back meetings week to week. We had a couple in July as well. We've had training. And so it's going to be a little heavy on the front end as we get our training in place and get situated. And I believe that was the conversation around one a month would be hopefully workable, knowing that all of these other things are happening. And you mentioned Thursdays, and so Mondays seem to work for folks. And what we can do is, I don't know if, what's it called, do a poll or something, to try to figure out dates for future meetings. And of course, we want to ensure that we're providing the public as much advance notice as possible. So my vision is maybe a month from today or something to that effect, that we would have our next meeting so that we can, establish that and get it out to the public, so the public is aware and informed of our meeting and they're able to watch or participate as it may be. Okay, so I think that there seems to be consensus. once a month with the understanding there's a lot going on. And, you know, it'll be heavier in the fall. But since we do, and jumping into our next subject matter, so are we good with that? Once a month and Mondays seem to work, and then there will be outreach to try to figure out whether it's a doodle poll or something like that. Availability of board members so that we can try to get at least the next 4 to 6 months dates up. Sounds good? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So the next agenda item is the ACC selection process, and part of the reason for meeting. So I sent out email today. Sorry, I wanted to get that sooner to you. It was a crazy weekend. I moved in the child to college, so it was a little hectic. So hopefully you were able to see your assignments, and hopefully, I don't think I gave anybody, I think everybody received what they requested. A few people were flexible. So we have, per our last meeting, it was agreed that we would have 3 subcommittees, 1 rubric committee, which would establish a rubric to review the applications for the administrative charging committee. And just as a reminder to the public, the application is still, the application, has it closed out, or are we still accepting applications for the administrative charging committee?
Applications are going to be coming in until members of the ACC are seated, but we can start, or the PAB can start going through.
Got it, right.
At any point. And I just wanted to, I know last week, our numbers were, I think in the 24, 25 range. Since this meeting started, we've received about 8 applications, and we're up to, we're approximately 64.
Wow, okay. So the goal was to have, you know, as a representative, we get to the PAB, we as a board select 2 members of the administrative charging committee. And so, you know, our goal was to have as much representation of the county as possible. Obviously, it's 2 people, so that's a little limiting, but there's a process. And so therefore we have 3 of us will be on the rubric committee, 3 will be on 1 application review committee, and 3 will be on a 2nd application review committee. So the rubric committee, which is made up of myself, Sarah, and Dr. Moore, need to get together. Oh, Dr. Moore, so sorry. We need to get together as soon as possible to start getting this rubric together for the rest of the board so that you all can look at applications. So I think our goal, and let me know if this sounds crazy, if we can get something in the next week, the rubric committee, because we can email too, right? This doesn't necessarily have to be meeting. And again, because we're not at quorum, we're within the Open Meetings Act, and we're, you know, within law, where we are fully compliant with state law with regards to meetings. We are able to then communicate about that and put together this rubric. So if we can get this in the next week together to send to the board, and then those on the application review committees can utilize the rubric to begin reviewing applications. And so what I would ask is, in my email, I broke you down into 2 separate groups that you communicate amongst yourselves to decide if you want like 1 point person to reach out or to communicate with Jansen as it relates to reviewing the applications. Because once the rubric is in place, you can begin reviewing the application so that it's not like 100 at a time, right? You can start taking them in, and then you'll utilize the rubric to narrow down folks that we would like to interview to be on the administrative charging committee. As a board, we can meet together. It was confirmed by Office of Law in closed session to interview folks to be on prospective members of the administrative charging committee. However, our vote on who we would like to select would have to be done in an open session. So I believe the timeline was October 15th is where Jansen had mentioned was sort of the goal that we would like to have appointed members to the ACC. And so we can work, I'll work with Jansen to try to work backwards a timeline so that we all have an idea of like where we need to be as it relates to reviewing the applications. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of applications, so we'll still aim for October 15th, but you know, if we need a little bit more time, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but that's the goal right now. Does that sound reasonable to members? I see Kim's hand up.
I just wanted to know if you all on the rubric committee would want us to forward you any suggestions that we had on the rubric, or.
Yeah, I think if board members have suggestions on the rubric, we kind of discussed some things that we were in agreement to at the last meeting and even in the first meeting, but we agreed that one member would be a 2-year term, one would be a 3-year term to match our terms. We agreed that we wanted someone that had some sort of, at least one of the members to have some sort of investigatory or compliance background, not necessarily law enforcement, right? There's lots of different things. Sarah mentioned attorneys and other professions that might have that background. And then certainly the other individual would possess, you know, other skills that they would bring in. So we talked about some things as a group. So certainly those things will be, you know, fleshed out and explained in the rubric. And if anybody has any recommendations, send them to me ASAP in the next couple days or so, and so that we can start looking at them. And I see Danny's hand up.
My question was just, I was kind of back on the meeting construct. So the law said that we have meetings with the heads of the agencies. So will they be at our monthly or quarterly PAB meetings? Do we anticipate?
So we're not, I do not believe we're required to have them at each of our meetings.
It
So
just said that we meet quarterly with them, at least quarterly.
right, so since we're doing more than quarterly, so I think as long as we get them in the next 3 months, we're compliant with the law.
So
Yes.
we just keep them on.
But of course, right, but you know, there might be an instance where it makes sense to have them come back more frequently in the future, but certainly at the minimum, it's the quarterly. But you know, if we meet more than that, we're not required to have them at those additional meetings.
Thank you. I was just a little confused. I was like,
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Any other questions? I thought I saw a little clapping hands. I don't know if someone was raising there. Okay. All right, so I'm just looking at my notes, making sure. Okay, so is there consensus on sort of the plan forward with ACC selection? Rubric committee endeavors to have a rubric in the next week. We will coordinate, we will receive your feedback, other board member feedback, and then once the other subcommittees receive the rubric, you will reach out and determine how to reach out to Jansen to start reviewing applications. And I think in the rubric, we'll kind of break things down, you know, as detailed to get us to a point where, like, you know, we can get to an interview process. Interviews can be in closed session in accordance with state law. However, our vote on the selection of the ACC members will be in public. Sounds good? And October 15th is our goal. Great. Okay. All right, so if there's nothing further, we'd like to go ahead and open the meeting up to public comment. I believe how we did it last time is that folks in the Q&A list your name and what city or town you're from, and then I will call upon you to provide public comments. Each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes. And please try to wrap up your comments when your time is up. And we just ask that all comments remain civil and appropriate for all the audiences that may be watching. Not that we have any case specific things at this point, but obviously we would not be able to discuss any, you know, specific cases or incidents, anything confidential. And so if there's anyone that would like to provide public comment at this time, please go ahead and enter your name and city or town where you live in the Q&A box, and I will call on you. Okay, I don't see, just want to make sure I'm not missing any.
No, this is Jennifer Sell from
Oh, there we
Savannah.
go, open. So Jennifer Sell from Savannah Park. Let me get my timer together. All right. Okay, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me? Can
Yes.
you? Okay, great. Yeah. So my name is Jennifer Sell. I live in Savannah Park. So again, I just wanted to thank you guys. I know you have a very busy schedule ahead of you the next month as you're choosing members of the Administrative Charging Committee, and it's a lot of responsibility, and many of us really appreciate the work that you are doing. I do just want to kind of provide just some background. As I mentioned before, I am a member of a coalition that supports police accountability in Anne Arundel County, and there were many of us who attended many county council meetings to help create to help formulate the bill that created the PAB, and I was really struck by kind of how the police chiefs have been working with you guys and making these presentations, because that's really just not what many of us citizens saw when we attended these county council meetings. You know, there's obviously they're trying really nice to impress you guys and get on your good side, which is really in such a huge difference from what we saw at the county council meetings, where there were just on some nights, I feel like up to 20 police officers in uniform who were sitting in the county council meetings, never giving testimony, but just sitting there as what I perceive to be intimidation to the county council members who, to remind them that they were supposed to vote certain ways on the PAB that the Federation of Police and the police chiefs wanted them to vote as. So I was really struck by the huge change in tone that those police officers are coming to you guys with. And I do just, you know, I just want to take this opportunity to remind you that that's not really what the citizens saw. I think that we really do need to take a close look at like what are the demographics of the county versus the arrests. I don't think that Chief Awad really answered that very well tonight. And I think that's something that you guys need to keep in mind. But you know, there are many people in the
wrap up,
community.
please.
Sure. I just offer the help from the people in the community who do have information and do this kind of work as their professional background. So thank you, and that's it.
Thank you so much for your public comment. And just as a reminder to the public, the board has definitely expressed an interest in meeting with community groups and members of the public, and also having future meetings dedicated to community groups and members of the public. And so as we work to develop our future meeting schedule and the agendas for those meetings, we certainly will be looking at that, because to the speaker's point, you know, having input from the public, members of the public that have been very involved in this will obviously be very instructive and helpful to us as a board. Making sure I don't see anyone else. No. All right, we don't have anyone else that has indicated that they would like to provide public comment. If there are no further questions or items for discussion, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Madam Chair, I motion that the meeting be adjourned.
There's a second? I think I saw Barney. I thought I saw Barney say second. Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.